Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everyone. I've mentioned this before, that a lot of what we deal with comes from, the challenges we deal with comes from traumas that we've dealt with in our lives. And it could be from childhood. It could be major traumas that you may have encountered as an adult. A lot of times we click into victim mode, thinking like, why am I dealing with this? Why does this have to happen? Sometimes there's answers, sometimes there's not. There is modalities to help you move your life forward. Loosely, we'll call them massage, craniosacral therapy being one of them. I'm going to talk more about that with her and potentially get some answers. And she helps people all the time with her practice in Pennsylvania. KellyAnne Riden is back with us. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well. And, it's tough. You go through something challenging, and you ask that question, why? Why is this happening? Why did this transpire the way it is? And how do I move my life forward? I'm sure you've gotten those questions from people you've worked with, right?
Many times, yes. And the simple answer is sometimes there are no answers. And then what do you do with those patients that are just stuck? And we kind of call it on the hamster wheel, where they're just, I'm explaining all my trauma. I'm trying to deal with it. I'm trying to process it, but they'll go to every person and be like, this is this, and I've been through that, and this happened to me, and now I'm stuck forever in this situation, or financially, or like, and there's no way out, right? They don't see a way out, and they just kind of almost take it on as their identity. And that can be a huge problem, because once you carry it with yourself as an identity, you never put it down. It's always being carried with you. So what do we do in those cases where just the trauma has been so great, the rubble from all of it is just too much to pick up the pieces? Broken relationships, people who won't talk to you, marriages destroyed, children who never see one of their parents again due to imprisonment, death, or someone who has been molested or raped. And I mean, those are things that you can get justice through the courts, perhaps. And sometimes you won't. Sometimes the courts fail us as well because of complexities of situations. And it's hard to determine when both parties are saying two different things. And unless someone was there, an outcome really can't be determined. So then that leaves somebody feeling like there's no justice, there's no freedom, there's no conviction for those who have harmed them. And it's how do we pick up the pieces? Because obviously what they've lost can't be restored, right? Or can it, is the question. So as of what they had currently is no longer in some situations. Some situations you can't go back to a spouse or a parent, or in an environment where you are constantly being abused, either physically, mentally, emotionally, verbally, spiritually. There are some times where there is no going back, there is no fixing, there is no reconciliation with that party, that person, those family members. And it can be devastating for someone to say, this wasn't something I had done, put myself in, like this was an act that I didn't ask for. Why am I having to deal with all of these consequences, right? And that affects them not only physically, it can cause just like autoimmune responses in the body. Now they're stuck with ailments that just won't go away. There's no medicine for it, or they're constantly in with the doctors and they're basically saying, well, you have an autoimmune condition and there's no cure, but here's some medicines, here's some shots. Congratulations, you're probably going to be dealing with these side effects, so we're going to give you these drugs to counteract these side effects. And it's just a huge hamster wheel that always goes back to the trauma. I wouldn't be dealing with this if it weren't for the trauma. So it's just a perpetual hamster wheel that just keeps going and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what do we do with those cases, right? So a lot of times, because we are faith-based, we do offer them what we call biblical mentoring. Because in the cases where there are no answers and there's no easy fixes, yes, we do walk them through the stages of trauma, of just letting the trauma up and out. And that, of course, is different, again, for everyone. Some people sit up and talk about it. Some people need to cry. Some people need a space to let out their aggression. So we give them coping skills to help kind of filter them in the direction that their body needs in order to respond, and just get that out first off, because carrying that and pretending like everything is okay is not a way to move forward. It kind of keeps you in that victim mentality state. And oftentimes in those cases, we have problems where they're growing in some aspects of compassion and empathy for their abuser, but then they're also kind of covering it with a new type of Band-Aid that forms a new trauma, which is in the sense of, well, let's find a reason that makes this trauma that this person did to me okay. And we don't want that. It's honestly, it's taking responsibility, and we never want to make a victim feel like it was their fault and it is their responsibility. Like, what was done was, first off, hands down, wrong. It's okay. We need to acknowledge that and get them to a point where they can acknowledge that, and explain the difference between forgiveness and saying what they did was okay, right? We've always had a situation where no matter how severe the abuse is, well, this person had been through something similar. It's like, okay, but that doesn't make it all right that they went and did it to you. Or this person, their mom left them when they were a kid, and it might be a spouse that's hurting another. And it's like, well, that's not okay. That's not an excuse to allow disrespect or just dismissing feelings and not acknowledging their partner and their needs and just letting that fly, So it's helping them to create healthy boundaries, to not keep allowing it, to not actually keep them in that victim mentality state that's going to keep it snowballing, not just with that person, but with the next person. So they are not like, oh, I met this new person, they're great, but here's this thing, and then they did this, and it was just like this person, and it just is a snowball that keeps growing. So what we want to do is we want to acknowledge the pain, sit with them, help them grieve it. But then the next plan of moving forward is how, because like we had just acknowledged, there sometimes are no answers. So after the coping skills of just how to filter those emotions out, and that's when we use the emotion wheel here, helping them to first identify it, and then helping them walk through, all right, how do we get this up and out, whether it's punching a pillow or going into an aggressive type of, not necessarily therapy, but it would be a type of therapeutic outlet for them, whether it be karate, self-defense, something that's going to help them not stay vulnerable in their situation, and helping them deal with that as they go through it. Because you can imagine someone who has been physically restrained, they are not going to be able to move forward in a situation where maybe they're going to be in initial combat with somebody who is like sparring with them, and it might be kind of too much for them. However, moving forward from that, once we get them in that type of space, what we're going to do is we're going to offer them like biblical mentoring. Some of those people are just like, how can God let this happen? And that's when they're sort of opening the realm of like, okay, there's what we have going on earth, what we have going on in our lives, what we have happened to us, but then how in the supernatural and the spiritual, where is the healing in that? Because sometimes when there are no answers, that's when people start being open to those other entities, which is a good thing. But it also can be harmful as well if it's not shepherded in such a way where a person can receive it and they're being condemned by it. So we never want to use it to hurt them further, right? We would never give them passages that would speak on something they've been through or a poor choice that they made, or were in a situation that kind of condemns them. We want them to understand that God was there. God saw it, even though justice wasn't served in the way they felt was going to give them relief. it still can be used. In a lot of ways, it can be used, maybe not necessarily for yourself. Like maybe your situation will never get better. Maybe you'll never get your virginity back if you've been abused in that way. Maybe your spouse will never return. Maybe your spouse will never change if they had an alcoholism that just overtook their lives and yours as well, and you are just living in the rubble of it. Some of those things are irreparable, but what we can see is, okay, what's God's plan for me moving forward? Whether it's going back and helping somebody else out in that same situation, because nothing is ever lost in that sense. Like it can be used to make something better for someone else, and you can be a part of that. But first, we have to kind of break down those misconceptions about God, who he is, how he works, how he operates. So we do it very gently, not necessarily acknowledging the trauma. Like we've already done that. We've already divulged through the nerve lines and worked directly with the effects that it has, either on their vocal cords being silenced. We've already done that through the bodywork side of it, but then the emotional side of it is also dealing with, okay, now what next? Because you never want to leave someone feeling like, okay, we did all this stuff. You made progress. We're dumping you off. Good luck. Never do that. No. So we often teach them, okay, we go to Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible. I don't know if you can see that there. And then we just kind of walk them through it slowly. And Genesis is basically, a lot of people say it's about creation, how God created man and woman and for each other and all of that. And there's a second account of creation, and it's kind of told a little differently. So there's two accounts of that. And we walk them through it. And a lot of them are like, well, we already know this. This is stupid, right? Yes. In the way you've learned it before, yes. But we're teaching it very differently. Because if you take scripture, and yes, there's different people and characters and a lot of things to learn about them and how God used their stories, their traumas, their detriments that made them not enough or were unable to do a certain task, right, and overcome it, correct? So we have like David and Goliath. We have so many characters like Esther in like impossible positions, and God makes it possible, correct? But in some things, it doesn't look like that, especially when you've been through trauma. It just looks like there is no hope. There is no future. And then what do you do with that? So it's understanding, if you take any of these questions and apply them to scripture, no matter where you're reading, what does this say about God? Who is he, how he works, and how he operates? And generally how we do that, walking through the first few chapters of scripture, is we start just skimming the top. So for example, the first chapter starts in the beginning, right? Stop right there. What does this even mean? Okay. And then we say, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay. What do we learn here? Well, it's basic English, right? So what we're breaking it down now even more. Subject and predicate, right? What's the subject? It's the who or the what in the story, right? And then the predicate is like what they're doing, what it's like, or what it does, right? So a lot of people saying, oh, this is about creation. Because it says in the beginning, comma, God. It's about God. So as we keep skimming down, we start showing them and having them write out a list. Okay, what does this say about God? What do we learn here? And we learn a lot of times through repetition of words that we find again and again and again, like he created this and it was good. He created that and it was good. And he created these and they were good. So everything he makes, we learn it's good. We learn he doesn't just make one thing and says, there you go, that's it, that's all you get, and it's great. No. He creates abundance. He creates not just one tree, he creates multiple with different fruits in it. So abundance, and he's a provider, and he creates order, and he creates restoration. So once we get that list of things, and it goes on further as we go through it. So once we get that list of God and what he does and how he works, how he operates, all of a sudden we're starting to see, oh, okay, relating this back to our trauma, this wasn't of God. So it couldn't have been him.
Mm.
Then we go through and then we start in a different chapter, chapter 3, where it's talking about now the serpent. So the subject, the serpent, and who he is, how he works, how he operates. And that's when we start listing out his list and realizing he's crafty, he lies, there's deception, he questions God's things and motives and abilities and gets you to doubt and gets you confused. These are the concepts that the enemy uses. So then when we start saying, okay, now let's look at your trauma, which is this in alignment with? They've never said it's in alignment with God. So when they start asking why God allowed this, we know now it's not of God. God did not allow it. Now, why did it happen? Well, as we look further in other parts of Scripture, in the fall, in chapter 3 of Genesis, we can see how the corruption gets worse and worse. And as Scripture goes on, yes, Scripture is subdivided as like books of the Bible. You have Genesis, Leviticus, and you have like the Gospels later on. And a lot of people read them individually, whereas we teach people, you read it kind of like a storybook from beginning to end, because there is a reason why it progresses the way it does. And the reason for that is to show what God's intent was in the beginning, how sin enters the world and how it corrupts. So it starts with Adam and Eve. I only ate a piece of fruit. And then Cain and Abel, I only killed my brother. And then in the acts further, then it gets even worse and worse. And it's just a downward spiral in the corruption and just the mutiny against God and his will for his people and his creations. So you can just see how it just gets worse and worse and worse and more corrupt and why people do what they do. And a lot of picking through this, we get people who are in victim states who generally more often than not don't have compassion for their abuser, for the people who have done them wrong. They're angry, they're bitter, they have hate in them towards them, and they want revenge, right? And it's kind of like, okay, let's back it up here. And then we teach them, okay, like this is of God, this wasn't of God. We don't want to go in that direction because there's no good fruit in it. And then we start showing them, okay, if this person did this to you, how depraved are they? How much did they go through to think that this was okay to do to you? And how much powerful they thought they were going to feel to do that? How powerless did they feel? So then we start realizing, oh my gosh, they're a victim too. So then it gives them this compassion, and therefore it kind of softens. We don't want to say softens the trauma, because what that was done was completely wrong, right? And it's causing a spiral of just anxiety, fear, eating disorders, and like a whole plethora of just medical issues, sometimes emotional issues, and then just environmental, where you have to move, and just so many complications, right?
But it offers, I would think, some clarity and understanding. You're never going to condone what somebody did. And
right. We're never gonna say that that's okay.
Sure.
That is absolutely correct. But it's giving them a way to open the doors more easily to forgiveness, rather than shutting it and be like, nope, never, hope the worst for them.
Yep.
Hope they die most horrendous death. And it's like, okay, but they're not even thinking about you.
Yeah, they've already moved on.
Yeah, like if you're going to spend all this time bubbling and boiling up, like you're only going to hurt yourself. The anger and the bitterness is just going to sit there, and you're hoping and in those moments, we kind of give them different depictions of what that looks like. It's like you drinking the poison and hoping the other person gets sick. It's just not going to work. Now, we're not going to say be happy for them and clap as they keep sinning, right? Because there is justice. And then we go through those passages of like, here's where God intervened here. Then we get the question, well, why didn't he intervene with mine? And it's like, okay, well, here's another one. The book of Job is a huge one on that. Sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it has everything to do with what's going on in the spiritual warfare that's out in the world that's seeking to kill, separate, and destroy. That is the enemy's tactics. And when that happens, it's not necessarily that person doing this injustice to you. It's this person who's had injustice done to them. So therefore, they're going to do it to the next person they see as a threat.
Well, like
and
they
the
always
next
say, hurt people hurt people.
Hurt other people.
Yeah. And it's as much as that's painful to.
It's not an excuse that flies.
It's not an excuse. And
Yes.
it's almost hard to, it's the understanding. But we're just about out of time. I have to tell you, KellyAnne, I see what you do in a whole different light. I originally, and we've talked a number of times before, my view was craniosacral therapy, other modalities, using massage to work on traumas. Didn't know that also comes along with understanding, and if somebody's open to it, a biblical connection to that healing. Eye opener. had no
Call
idea.
it a spiritual healing as well, because we can heal the physical, we can deal with emotions and nerve lines, but there's always a point where people reach where it's like something is still missing.
Yeah.
And there's only one that can actually fill that gap, and that's God, that can heal and restore. And that's who he is, and that's how he works, and that's how he operates. And that's the victory. The revenge isn't, well, I hope this person gets their plight, right? It's overcoming them and them being restored as well. And sometimes that's hard for people to hear, but that's the ultimate goal. So everyone gets the healing. And sometimes it's not our job, but to know that there's other ways of channeling what you've been through, not only just to help yourself, but to help the next person behind.
Sure.
To not have to walk through that.
And there are some believe that there's always a lesson to be learned, and the person who did wrong will learn that lesson, maybe in another life. There's that belief too. But ultimately, it's on them. It's on them, but we need to release it from us, because it's like having chains around you. Best way to find you, KellyAnne? I know that you can only do this work, at least the massage, craniosacral therapy aspect of it in person in Pennsylvania. But if somebody wants to connect with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so you can call us at our business line at 717-516-0959, and that is the office number. You can call or text that number, or you can look at us online at www.ka.clinicalmassage, and you can definitely message us through the website there as well.
Thank you for today. Thank you for a whole other view of what you do. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Steve.
We'll talk soon. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.